Tonight, important health news affecting millions of Americans. A government panel says most women under 50 no longer need to be screened for breast cancer. And new concerns about two of the most popular cholesterol-lowering drugs. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, Mr. Who? Tear down that firewall. President Obama challenges China's government to allow unfettered access to the internet. Sarah Palin back on the trail, this time selling a book and her version of the 2008 presidential campaign. And what has Steve Hartman gotten himself into now?
Good Lord. You are kidding me.
Wait till you see tonight's Assignment America.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
And good evening, everyone. We're beginning with a story that will affect millions of American women. Government health experts made a major change today in the guidelines for breast cancer screening. With nearly 200,000 women in this country expected to be diagnosed this year and more than 40,000 expected to die from it, early detection has long been emphasized as a way to save lives. And over a recent 2-year period, 64% of women in their 40s got a mammogram. 40 has been the age women were told to start getting screened, but now the experts say most women should wait until they're 50. Dr. Jennifer Ashton is with us tonight. Jennifer, this is a major shift in what we've been told for years.
That's right, Katie. These new guidelines challenge long-standing guidelines for detecting breast cancer. They come from a respected panel of government medical experts which regularly makes recommendations on how to prevent disease.
No, don't jump, don't jump. I hate you.
42-year-old Jessica Moser was afraid she might die when she was diagnosed last year with cancer in both breasts. But her surgeon said she had a better chance because her cancer was detected early through a routine mammogram.
I'd save my life.
But under new guidelines, women Moser's age with no known risk are no longer encouraged to get regular breast cancer screenings. The task force says routine mammograms for younger women are not effective. For every one breast cancer death prevented, more than 1,900 women ages 40 to 49 need to be screened. That number drops to 1,300 for women ages 50 to 59 and nearly 400 for women ages 60 to 69. In addition, the task force says when screening starts at 40, there are more false positives leading to unnecessary biopsies.
It doesn't make sense to be putting our efforts into doing mammography screening in women under 50 when we can find better tools that will help more women and be more accurate.
Another major change, the expert panel says women ages 50 to 74 only need to be screened every 2 years. It's unclear if the new guidelines will impact insurance reimbursement for mammograms, which cost on average about $125. The American Cancer Society rejects the new guidelines, arguing any lives saved by mammography are worth the expense. It will continue to recommend annual screening for all women, beginning at 40.
We have made significant gains in reducing deaths from breast cancer over the past 19 or 20 years. And those gains, in no small part, are based on women starting at age 40 and getting screened every year.
There's me while I have my hat on. I have no hair.
And this is?
That's Julia.
Jessica Moser had no family history and never imagined she would be diagnosed at age 42 with breast cancer. She believes she's living proof that mammograms save lives.
To have the technology and not to take advantage of it, it would be a real loss. It would be throwing away something that could help you.
And the task force also found there's no evidence self-breast exams save lives, Katie.
And Jennifer, while this is so contrary to what we've always heard, recently there has been some pushback when it comes to certain screening techniques, hasn't there?
Right. It's a little counterintuitive because you have to balance the risks of low-grade radiation exposure to the possibility of invasive biopsies, which can also be disfiguring. So you have to really balance the risks of a screening mammogram from the possibility that you could detect a cancer.
Jessica didn't have a family history of breast cancer, so what about those who do? I can't imagine these guidelines are relevant to them necessarily.
Correct, Katie. They do not apply to women women at high risk, so women with a strong family history should talk to their doctor about which screening tests are best for them.
So now women and their doctors are going to be quite conflicted about this, aren't they?
They are, Katie, and it's going to stem up a lot of anger and confusion. And as a medical professional, I can understand the statistical thinking behind these recommendations. But as a doctor who has many young women who have been diagnosed with breast cancer by a screening mammogram, I think I'm going to have a hard time recommending that they don't get screened.
Or at least wait till 50, right?
Exactly.
Dr. Jennifer Ashton. Jennifer, thanks so much. Now to another major health story tonight, this one involving two popular cholesterol-lowering drugs. About 30 million prescriptions were written for Vytorin and Zetia last year, generating $3.5 billion in sales. But tonight, Dr. John LaPook tells us about a new study that questions whether they actually prevent heart disease.
In its first head-to-head comparison with an older drug, Zetia lowered cholesterol but fell short in preventing the plaques in arteries that may lead to heart attacks.
The assumption has been that as LDL is lowered with Zetia, that patients will benefit. And this study just doesn't support that assertion.
The study looked at 208 people at high risk for heart disease who were already taking a statin drug to lower cholesterol. Half were given Zetia and half niacin, a form of vitamin B. Both drugs lowered LDL, or bad cholesterol, Zetia by 19% and niacin by 10%. In addition, niacin raised good cholesterol, or HDL, by 18%. The major finding? Niacin reduced the amount of plaque, while Zetia did not.
Niacin was superior. Niacin showed clearly that when added to standard therapy, arterial buildups in the necks were reversed.
Merck, the maker of Zetia, stands by the drug, saying, "Nothing from the study changes the well-established understanding that lowering LDL cholesterol is the primary target of therapy according to the guidelines. Zetia and Vytorin, when used as a supplement to a healthy diet, are effective in reducing LDL cholesterol." This is not the first study questioning the value of Zetia. Last year, sales of two Zetia-containing drugs fell by over 20% after research showed they failed to prevent plaque buildup in arteries.
So it's leaving many people with doubts about whether this very successful branded drug that's quite expensive is really going to deliver the performance that we hope for.
Today's study was relatively small and supported by the makers of niacin. Critics of the study await a much larger trial of Zetia. In the meantime, those results are not expected for another 3 years. Katie?
All right, Dr. John LaPook. John, thank you. And for more about both of tonight's medical stories, you can go to our partner in health coverage, WebMD.com. Now to President Obama's trip to Asia. In China today, he challenged leaders of the communist government to give people greater access to the internet. China is the most important stop on a tour that started in Japan and Singapore and will end in South Korea on Thursday. Our chief White House correspondent Chip Reed is traveling with the president.
At a town hall with students in Shanghai, the president was asked about what critics call the Great Firewall, the Chinese government's tight grip on the internet, which includes blocking access to sites like Facebook and Twitter.
I've always been a strong supporter of open and internet use. I'm a big supporter of non-censorship.
It's one of the touchiest topics in China, and the president's long answer took on the tone of a polite lecture.
And I have a lot of critics in the United States who can say all kinds of things about me. I actually think that that makes our democracy stronger, and it makes me a better leader, because it forces me to hear opinions that I don't want to hear.
The White House said the rebuke was aimed at China's leaders, but if they were watching it on TV, most Chinese were not, because the government allowed it to run on only one local channel in Shanghai. In the rest of China, they aired a soap opera. But there did appear to be a crack in the Great Firewall. A CBS News analysis shows Mr. Obama's comments were posted in full on government websites, available to more than 300 million Chinese with access to the internet. If that's a moral victory for the president, he'll probably want to savor it, because otherwise this visit to China is expected to bring more disappointment than success.
As you know, this is my first visit to China.
The president says a top goal in coming here is to create jobs for Americans by convincing President Hu Jintao to open China's markets to more U.S. goods. But China expert Peter Navarro says China has the Obama administration over a barrel because of the nearly $1 trillion China holds in U.S. debt.
The problem in the White House is that they want China's money more to finance the U.S. budget deficits in the short term than they want China to reform its trade policy.
Later today, the president will meet with President Hu Jintao for about 2 hours. The economy is at the top of the agenda, but no major breakthroughs are expected. Resorting to the language of diplomacy, White House officials say they are laying the foundation for future progress. Katie?
Chip Reed reporting from Beijing. Thank you, Chip. In tonight's CBS Money Watch, General Motors reported today it lost more than $1 billion in the third quarter of this year since coming out of bankruptcy, but that's still a big improvement over previous quarters. And the company says it will soon start paying back the money it borrowed from you. National correspondent Dean Reynolds now on GM and the very long road to recovery.
It's a measure of how far General Motors needs to go that today its executives were relieved to report the company is still losing money, but now less than expected.
We're seeing signs of, I won't call it the recovery, but certainly signs of stability and stabilization.
But the $1.2 billion loss from July to September is still big trouble, and it looks especially bad compared to competitor Ford's $1 billion profit during the same 3 months. Analysts were less than thrilled by GM's numbers.
I think we were a little bit disappointed at the amount of loss that they experienced after going through the whole bankruptcy process.
The federal government has put $50 billion into GM to keep it afloat. Now, attempting to repair its image as a company on the dole, GM says it's well enough to start repaying the money years ahead of schedule. First installment, $1 billion next month.
We're committed to do this. We have to begin the process. It's a personal commitment. It's a commitment of the entire leadership team of the company to repay the taxpayer.
For now, though, GM is simply returning some of the money the government extended it. Paying off the loans with actual profits will obviously have to wait until there are some. GM's losses are partially due to increased spending on things like new critically acclaimed models and more marketing. The host of new vehicles means GM is charging more on average than its competitors, in some cases a lot more. And while the car site Edmunds.com says its surveys show increasing interest in the new models, the same surveys show GM's pricing may well be discouraging consumers from buying what it's offering. Dean Reynolds, CBS News, Chicago.
And coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, the battle between Sarah Palin and Team McCain about what really happened in Campaign 08. Former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin is coming out tomorrow with her account of the 2008 presidential campaign. And her book, Going Rogue, is putting her at odds again with former officials of the McCain campaign. Here's our senior political correspondent, Jeff Greenfield.
She is finally here, Sarah Palin.
From Oprah today to Walters tomorrow, to a 3-week-long blitz, starting with a bus tour through much of Middle America, Sarah Palin is in full-fledged campaign mode. Not to win votes, but to sell books. 1.5 million of them are now in print. But based on what she's written, she may be selling books while settling scores. Again and again, last year's running mate takes direct aim at the people at the top of John McCain's campaign, including campaign chief Steve Schmidt and senior advisor Nicole Wallace. She charges they micromanaged her, wouldn't let her talk to the press, lulled her into a damaging series of interviews with Katie Couric.
Have you ever been involved with any negotiations, for example, with the Russians?
We have trade missions back and forth. We do. It's very important when you consider even national security issues with Russia, as Putin rears his head and comes into the airspace of the United States of America. Where do they go? It's Alaska. It's just right over the border.
While backbiting is not unusual after losing campaigns, this, says longtime Washington Post reporter Dan Balls, is in a whole different class.
This was an absolute total breakdown within the McCain-Palin camps, and I know that a lot of people, whichever side they were on, felt that it left a stain on the campaign.
Thank you so much.
The McCain camp has begun to fire back in recent days, on background and on the record. Campaign Chief Schmidt, for example, has said of Palin's accounts, quote, "It's fiction and it's not true," unquote. Shoshana Walsh, who covered Palin's campaign for Fox News and who co-authored a book on her, says Palin's accounts don't square with reality.
This is her truth and this is her reality, but through some rigorous reporting, the scenes are very different.
Why did you wait to get a passport?
Certainly it's not a lack of interest in the world. Again,
Some of Palin's toughest words concern the interview she did with Katie Couric. She writes that Nicole Wallace, who had worked with CBS News as a Republican analyst before joining the McCain campaign, convinced her to do the interview, assuring her it would be favorable. In an on-the-record interview with CBS News, Wallace says none of the conversations Palin quotes in the book ever took place. McCain aides also say the strategy was always for Palin to do network interviews, with Couric coming third after Charles Gibson and Sean Hannity.
Oh, no, it's nothing negative at all.
She also charges the interviews were unfairly edited, a charge those who ran McCain's campaign dispute. No debate about the book
I will not seek re-election as governor.
or about Palin's sudden resignation as Alaska governor last summer will have much impact among her admirers, who are many and ardent.
Even when people in the Beltway want to dismiss her because of some of these allegations in the book or her resigning her Alaska governorship, they're not going anywhere. They love her for those maverick moves.
As for her political future, a new CBS poll says she has work to do. Just 23% of voters view her favorably, compared to 38% who don't. And more than 6 in 10 say she lacks the ability to be an effective president.
But Palin has 2 years to work on those numbers, and right now most Republicans view her favorably, many with an intensity no politician can match. Katie?
Jeff Greenfield. Jeff, thanks very much. And we'll have more news in a moment. And now the latest on Major Nidal Malik Hasan, the Army psychiatrist accused of murdering 12 fellow soldiers and a civilian at Fort Hood, Texas. Defense officials tell CBS News a special civilian military panel will investigate how Hasan was managed by his Army superiors. In particular, how officials at Walter Reed Army Medical Center dealt with his performance reviews. In other news, the next stop for some Guantanamo Bay prisoners may be northwestern Illinois. Today, federal officials inspected a maximum security prison there. It's just 8 years old and mostly empty. Illinois Senator Dick Durbin says it would be the safest prison in America to send detainees once Guantanamo is closed, but other lawmakers say it would make the state a terror target. In Florida today, the start of an 11-day space shuttle mission.
3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis.
Atlantis is carrying 6 astronauts and about 30,000 pounds of spare parts to the International Space Station. And coming up next, one man's attempt to bring a giant bird back from extinction in Steve Hartman's Assignment America. Finally tonight, a lot of men like to build things, a bookcase for the den, a go-kart for the kids, and of course that classic do-it-yourself project, the 747. Steve Hartman welcomes you aboard tonight's Assignment America.
Just about every single aircraft part you could possibly imagine, it will be somewhere through the piles of this desert.
A couple hours outside Los Angeles, there's a huge airplane junkyard. They cater mostly to Hollywood, selling movie props. But this guy shops here for a very different reason.
I need one more overhead bin.
Anthony Toth wants to own a 747.
I would totally buy this.
And for the last 20 years, he's been buying it.
Actually still has the winding staircase.
One piece at a time.
This piece right here, in really good shape still.
Specifically, his dream has been to build a Pan Am 747. They've been out of business since '91. But Anthony's dream goes back even further.
So these are actually photographs I took as a young child of the inside of a Pan Am 747.
As a kid, Anthony was so fascinated by the plane his family took on vacation, he would snap pictures of every part.
I think I wanted to recreate the experience of flying at home.
Later, as an adult, he started purchasing those parts in hopes that someday he could recreate the actual plane, right down to the place settings. Impossible, you say? Welcome aboard.
Turn around and right there, it's a Pan Am globe.
Oh, you're right. Wow, every detail. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was 1979 on board a vintage Pan Am 747 Clipper jet. But if you take away the airplane sounds and have the cameraman and I stop bouncing around for no particular reason and open up the main cabin door, you'll see this isn't exactly an exact replica. It's just as much of the plane as Anthony could fit in his garage.
I would do an upper deck, and I would love to have one, but that's my bedroom above there.
What Anthony does have is the entire first-class cabin and galley, which he uses for entertaining. And just about everything is vintage, except the custom packaged peanuts, which he buys new.
Because there already is a 30-year-old nut in the cabin.
Well stated.
In total, Anthony's put well over $50,000 into this project.
Absolutely.
And he's not done.
I'm never satisfied with the cabin. I always want more. Oh my God! This is literally filled with Pan Am fabric.
Ironically, Anthony works in sales for United Airlines. He's not married. Go figure.
You can never have too many Pan Am seat covers at home.
So there's really no one to rein him in.
That's the actual Pan Am staircase. I'd put this in my front yard if none of my neighbors would mind.
Just be glad you're not a neighbor. And be gladder still that Anthony's family didn't go on cruise ships.
Yeah.
Steve Hartman, CBS News, Los Angeles.
And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Kitty Couric. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. For the latest news anytime, go to cbsnews.com. Good night.